Stephen King is recognized as the master of horror fiction, and several of his novels have been turned into iconic films such as Misery, Carrie, and The Shining. But did you know that once upon a time he actually directed a film based on one of his own works, and it earned him a nomination for the Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Director?
Delightfully devilish, Seymour.
Yes everybody, welcome back to Delightfully Devilish, the show where we discuss films that all at once meet the criteria of being the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm your host Jukebox Harry, and today we are going to look at one of the lowest rated Stephen King films, which still maintains a pretty big cult following. According to Rotten Tomatoes, a poll of 48 different films based on the works of Stephen King puts Maximum Overdrive at number 44. Just below The Dark Tower. The movie was adapted from one of his earliest short stories, Trucks, which I actually studied while I was back in uni. The main focus of the story was humans being made into slaves by sentient trucks and being forced to spend the entirety of their lives fueling vehicles endlessly. It's a story of machines turning into sentient beings and human beings turning basically into machines. And there was a lot of subtextual commentary on the difference between man and machine. So let's see just how well that translates to screen when its creator is in charge of seeing that happen every step of the way. Maximum Overdrive starts with a cheesy image of planet Earth getting clouded by a green fog, and title text indicating that this is some kind of alien effect. When we get down to Earth, we spot Stephen King himself as the first character.
Honey, this machine just called me an asshole.
I have never seen that joke in a film before, but that is a classic. Then the music of AC/DC kicks in, Stephen King's favourite band. And the music actually gives the film a bit of a lighthearted tone, so it might not be as dark as you're expecting from the creator of The Shining and Misery. AC/DC actually did the entire soundtrack to this film and released it as their album Who Made Who, which was one of their most successful releases. We see technology starting to develop a mind of its own, including a mechanical bridge starting to go up and causing vehicles to roll back and crash into each other.
Far out.
Even these arcade machines start to go haywire.
Your mom.
There was nothing preceding that line. There was no reason it needed to be said. It's just there, but I'm glad that it is. This guy gets blinded by fuel. And just listen to the music that's playing there. It's got a malevolent mood, but it's also blaringly repetitive. I personally didn't mind it that much, but I can see it bothering other viewers. Then we get a realistic portrayal of the American workforce.
Now you want me to work for 9 hours and only clock in for 8?
On parole, boy. Either your ass belongs to me or it belongs to the state of North Carolina.
So we're probably hoping that he's gonna die at some point.
Oh, shit.
According to the time cards, there's also someone named Gene Poole. Why is there someone named Gene Poole? It never comes back in the film. No joke about things being eliminated from the Gene Poole. I actually researched this and that's a real person. Turns out he's the dolly grip for this film. This robotic carver starts acting up. And there's that music again. Some local hick starts making light of the situation.
Somebody give me a rag.
Hey, that knife go rabbit on you, sweet thing.
She almost lost an arm, but sure, let's all laugh about it. This African-American character gets hypnotized by an arcade game machine before being electroshocked by it. I never knew an arcade machine could do that, even if it was sentient, but I'm guessing some of the machines in this film will just have mysterious powers. Then we get a pretty great death scene, with this guy being killed by a soda machine. And you can tell by this moment that Maximum Overdrive isn't afraid to have blood in it, which is good for both a horror film and a Stephen King story. And then some dumbass kid who trips his bicycle over nothing is run over by a steamroller. So we're only a few minutes into this film, but already we're seeing some original and creative kills, a decent use of blood, and a willingness to kill children on screen. All this goes to suggest that Maximum Overdrive knows what gimmicks its audiences are looking for, and it still has the conviction to try to shock them by killing kids.
Laughs are cheap. I'm going for gasps.
Then the film's iconic mascot becomes sentient, a truck with a face of the Green Goblin from Spider-Man. The addition of a face on this truck actually gives it a certain menacing personality, so that's a nice touch. In comes Haley Joel Notzment, and the voice of Lisa Simpson. After investigating the area, a truck comes at Haley, and Lisa Simpson starts screaming.
Yes! Are you dead?
Yeah, if you thought Lisa Simpson was annoying, then her whiny-ass southern counterpart surely ain't gonna win any favors from you. The guy starts investigating the truck for some reason, instead of immediately trying to get away from it. At this point I started wondering why some people can still drive cars but other vehicles have become sentient, but I'm assuming that things are just waking up at different times. Or at least that's the argument I'm going to make to ignore the plot hole. Here comes another load. This kid rides down the street looking at the carnage created by the machines. First of all, we see eskies, or coolers, with spilled drinks everywhere, because wasted beverages is always a tragedy. Then we see several human victims and for some reason a dog killed by a toy police car that drove into its mouth. Normally a dog dying in a film is enough to get you riled up or crying, but this one is just really confusing. In comes an ice cream van, and its friendly jingle just sounds haunting in the post-carnage silence. So that goes to show that Maximum Overdrive knows how to build atmosphere when it wants to. Then the lawnmower starts, and so does the rock music. It chases the kid, who easily outruns it because, you know, it's a fucking lawnmower. Interesting side note, during production, that lawnmower actually hit a wood block which blew a bunch of splinters into the eye of the guy that was director of photography, and he sued the director for losing an eye. So there's real life tragedy involved in this film. Then this truck runs over Blind Joe here, and it's a pretty bloody death. Then it dumps trash in a Bible salesman's car who gets so pissed off that he has to grab his suitcase so that he can go out and chastise it. Emilio Estevez tries to help Bible Man get out of the way, but he pushes him away and runs off in the complete wrong direction. The truck then backs into him and knocks him into a ditch. Then it runs over his Bible suitcase, which is apparently empty. So that was why he grabbed it, so we could have a symbolic shot of machines triumphing over the gods. Nice touch, Stephen King. Then about 35 minutes into the film, we get the image of the truck circulating the gas station. And this is meant to be one of the pinnacle images from the original story, an army of trucks descending upon people.
Going, Curtis.
How the fuck is he gonna know? You're the know-it-all smartass, Lisa Simpson, figure it out. A truck comes after them, and after a brief chase there's an unconvincing explosion of the trailer followed by another unconvincing explosion of the truck itself. The same vehicle exploded twice.
Write that down, write that down!
Curtis, what is going on?
I don't know!
Exactly, you don't know. Nobody knows, so shut the fuck up, Lisa. But she doesn't, she just keeps complaining, so brace yourself for it. Their car tries to enter into the truck stop, but it flips, and we really hope that Lisa Simpson will get killed in this scene so that she'll shut up. But they save her, much to the audience's disappointment.
I'm caught in this goddamn street. Will you help me?
Let her die!
Seriously, I don't know why Stephen King cast someone with such an annoying voice and made her the loudest character in the film. That's a surefire way just to alienate your audience. She's more annoying than Laureen Landon's character in Maniac Cop. Then in comes Boss Hogg with a missile launcher that came out of nowhere, but I fully believe that he has a deadly weapon on him at all times, because America. He destroys 2 trucks, one of them containing a collection of toilet paper. And instantly, everyone suffering from the coronavirus toilet paper shortage of 2020 just cried out.
I felt a great disturbance in the force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror.
Talk about timeliness.
A girl hitching her way down to Florida needs sun protection. That's what I was doing before every machine in the world went into maximum overdrive.
Oh, that's why they call it that.
The characters have a discussion in the back and start pulling out the guns. So now this ragtag group of hicks has turned into a group of patriotic heroes. Nice.
Nice.
Emilio Estevez rubs his spit on this girl's forehead for some reason. And then Kiss My Grits here goes for the Oscar with her superiority complex over the machines.
You can! We made you!
Ah, this scene is just gorgeous.
We're just some loyalty, you puky thing! We made you!
Maximum Overdrive features her and Yardley Smith. And yet the sole cast member that got an acting nomination at the Golden Raspberry Awards was Emilio Estevez for some reason. And he was a perfectly fine protagonist. I don't understand that at all.
I hate those fucking trucks.
Really?
It turns out Bible Joe is still alive in the ditch across the street. So 2 of the survivors decide to go risk their lives and help him. Unfortunately, Lisa Simpson isn't one of them. She just stays back at the truck stop screaming like a bird.
Where are they?
Shut up, bird!
They leave Bible Man there to die, but they rescue the kid.
I think they're dead.
I wish you were. The next day, in comes a construction vehicle and a military car with a turret gun. Boss Hogg fires at it with a missile launcher, but the turret gunner goes all Columbine on the truck stop.
Wow. But it's a lucky thing I had my pieces.
Your pieces?
My guns.
Oh.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bang!
After half of the building is destroyed, kiss my grits to size, this is the perfect time to go for the Oscar again.
We made you! Can't you understand?
Want to know?
You can't do this! We made you!
The truck responds predictably, but she goes out with a bang by destroying a monument to America, a Miller beer truck. Of all the trucks to be destroyed, that was the one I wanted to survive. That was painful to look at. The gunner starts communicating by honking in Morse code, demanding that the humans pump fuel for the vehicles. And this is where the film really becomes faithful to its source material. The humans are all turned into industrial slaves for a line of machines that stretches on for miles. The humans steadily become worn out by this. Then the story leaves its source material behind and goes back to being shamelessly 80s, starting with the Mighty Duck himself dropping a grenade on the turret car. And then everyone waits until nighttime for some reason. Nothing really happens between now and then. I don't know. The humans all escape into an underground tunnel, and then the vehicles destroy the rest of the truck stop. The timing for a lot of these decisions, it doesn't really line up. Loaded with weapons, all our heroes start to run off to an inlet where they can escape technology.
Human here, human here, human here.
And the kid does what most middle-class white school kids would do in the face of sadness and starts shooting up the place.
I don't want this anymore.
And then the others destroy the ice cream truck from earlier. Once the heroes get to the inlet, the Green Goblin comes back to kill one last guy, but Emilio Estevez hits him with another missile. And that actually marks the last stand in the film. It's kind of anticlimactic. There should have been more of a battle there. But everyone leaves on a boat, we get some title text explaining that everything ends up okay, and taking a shameless shot at the Russians, just because.
Curtis, when can we get off this boat? You know I get seasick!
Oh my god, just throw that bitch overboard! And an iconic AC/DC song plays over the credits. So, is Maximum Overdrive a good film? Not exactly. To be a good film, you really need a story with some sense of movement in it, and Maximum Overdrive doesn't really have that. All the depth in the themes about machines becoming sentient and humans becoming mechanical gets thrown aside in favor of just having the gimmick of a bunch of killer cars, and it's not really all that moving. But is Maximum Overdrive a bad film? Hell no! It's a shameless barrage of glorious explosions and bloody deaths with a rock music soundtrack and a bunch of cheesy dialogue. As far as a spectacle goes, this is where the film really succeeds. It's action-packed, bloody, explosive, and its villains really feel like a genuine threat. There's nothing particularly brilliant about the film's visual style, but it is handled with a lot of competency. And the cast in this film were mostly fine. The actors are all appropriately cheesy as generic 80s characters, with the standouts being Emilio Estevez as everyone's favourite rebellious teenage hero, and Ellen McElduff as the overly melodramatic waitress. With Yardley Smith, it's hard to be critical about her without being a bully. I'll just say that there is a certain role suited for an actress with a voice like that, and a constantly screaming Southern belle is definitely not that part. Stephen King's work as director gave me mixed feelings. On the one hand, the brilliant mind that knew what readers wanted when it came to compelling characters and psychological horror really isn't present here. But on the other hand, he knows exactly what audiences looking for a guilty pleasure in an 80s horror film are looking for. And after figuring that out, he just throws them at the screen. Stephen King has no delusions about this film. He called it a moron movie and confessed that he was high on cocaine the entire time throughout production, so that can explain his apparent lack of finesse. There was a lot of Stephen King novels that got translated to the screen in the 1980s and ended up being just lifeless and cheesy. These included Cujo, The Running Man, Children of the Corn, Pet Sematary, and Firestarter. Although I've read the books based on 3 of those, and I will say that Firestarter was not a great book. Christine served as a good adaptation of one of his works, but even then only so much was able to translate over from the source material. And The Shining was terrifying, but it strayed ridiculously far away from its source material. With Maximum Overdrive, I would consider it one of the better Stephen King films from the 80s. It doesn't have the intellectual roots of its source material, but it does have the decade-defining elements of an 80s horror film. It's an effective product of its time, and it's just intense enough to take seriously, but also just ridiculous enough to be hilarious. And that's the making of a successful guilty pleasure. It's not the finest tale of man versus machine, but with a bunch of armed heroes going up against an army of killer trucks, it has enough genre gimmicks to entertain. If you've ever actually read Trucks and you're concerned about how well the source material would translate to film, you need to ask yourself if there's really enough material there to do that. Having read the story myself, I can certainly see where the depth lies. The mood was deeply nihilistic and the characters were very vulnerable, but the horror laid more in the fears of the uncertain future that the world was facing. There was an ever-present threat, but the story actually ended at what would have been the halfway point of the film. Because that's the point in the story where the characters are forced to face the kind of future they'll have to deal with if they don't do anything about it. To get the best out of the source material, Trucks would be better suited to being a Twilight Zone episode, or to having its key story be a subplot in a larger scale story about man versus machine. If there was a film that took a very global look at machinery dominating society, then this could be one of many very compelling story arcs. But to turn this into a feature-length movie, you need to add something more, and that's exactly what Stephen King did. He makes his source material just 1/3 of the narrative. It basically becomes the middle section of the story, with a prologue being added to show what happens when machines first become sentient in society, and an epilogue to show humans prevailing against it. With the latter, it does sacrifice sacrifice its grim nihilistic tone in favor of an 80s cheesy optimism. But what Maximum Overdrive lacks in dramatic poignancy, it ultimately makes up for with its sheer violent fun and body count. Maximum Overdrive gets 6 killer trucks out of 10. It lacks the literary intellect of finer Stephen King adaptations, but it's a film which is intense and funny, packed with a violent barrage of bloody deaths and explosions. And they make this tale of man vs. machine one of the finer and more entertaining films to be adapted from his work. And that does it for today's episode of Delightfully Devilish. You guys, if there's any movies you want me to discuss, please leave them in the comment section below. If you'd like to see more episodes, please hit that subscribe button. So until next time, please stay safe during the coronavirus. I've been your host, Jukebox Harry. Peace.
We made you!